I remember a time when there were a lot of movies that were being made, and there were movies that were fun to watch, but there wasn't any really real representation for me. Not many movies that captured my attention or captured my heart and was something filled with so much relatability and awareness and representation. And it wasn't until certain movies like Wizard of Oz or 5 Feet Apart or Wicked did I actually be able to feel and see that representation and see that awareness of different things that I needed to see as a viewer. We are back. We are back for 2025 with the podcast, with another episode. We are here. We are doing it. So welcome to the Blooming Roses podcast, where we share stories of growth while blooming in adversity. My name is Ashley, and I'm so happy you guys are here. To start off the first episode of 2025, I wanted to share with you guys one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite movies. It's human touch, our first form of communication. Safety, security, comfort, all in the gentle caress of a finger, or the brush of lips on a soft cheek. It connects us when we're happy, bolsters us in times of fear, excites us in times of passion and love. We need that touch from the one we love almost as much as we need air to breathe. But I never understood the importance of touch, his touch, until I couldn't have it. From 5 Feet Apart. So, if you guys are new to my podcast, or this is the first time that you've heard my voice or seen my face, my name is Ashley. I am the host and the producer of the Blooming Roses podcast. I also have my own personal YouTube channel, Ashley's Roses, where I've kind of made my presence known on social media. But now I've grown into doing a podcast called Blooming Roses, where we share stories of growth while blooming in adversity, where I've had amazing guests on this podcast who've been able to share their stories and share their stories of adversity and how they took on those different trials and how it helped them grow as a person. And in this season 5 that I've been trying to do for the past year and a half, I've been posting and ghosting a lot. I've been trying to revamp the podcast and shift the podcast, still in frame of the foundation of what started this podcast, but just shifting it in a different aspect where you hear more from me and my life. And then every once in a while, we'll bring guests back onto the podcast, or we'll do a rewind and go back to a previous episode so you can hear those episodes from the past. Because even today, a lot of those episodes still have words of truth and inspiration in them that I think that everyone should have the chance to listen to. But for those who don't know who I am, I also am running my own company called Roseraie Media, where we rise to bloom. And that is where you can watch the video version of the podcast. So the podcast can be listened to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and you can watch episodes on YouTube, Roseraie Media on YouTube, but also on Spotify as well. And I've been sharing my journey of being a filmmaker, but I've also been sharing a little bit of health and wellness in my journey of living with cystic fibrosis. And last year, I think it was in November actually, I ended part 1 of an episode and never did part 2. And I said I would post it December 3rd, but that did not happen. So here we are again. But I thought it'd be perfect timing actually to start the new year with part 2, because I feel like now I have more clarity of what to share. And I've also experienced and gone through some things in the past few months that really apply to this message even more. So part 1 was growing in the dark, and just kind of to recap that, but I highly recommend you go listen to that first and then come back to part 2. But part 1 is where basically I was trying to share the fact that there are times where I will post and ghost, and it's because I'll be working on something and there's a lot of things to balance, but at the same time I don't want to post it and then not end up following through. So sometimes I found for me, like, posting and ghosting and growing in the dark, growing behind the scenes to produce something special for you guys is more beneficial than just like posting so much things all the time, where it's quality versus quantity. And in that episode, I talk more about my experience with that and then the lessons I've been learning with that, and I'm still learning lessons with that. And then I was also talking about Wicked and just how much I relate to different aspects of The Wizard of Oz and Wicked and everything like that. And I said I could do a whole episode about that, but I didn't want it to just be fully based on Wicked. I wanted to stretch it out a little bit more. And so for part 2, for growing in the dark, I wanted to start out with that quote because 5 Feet Apart is a really impactful film for me. I feel like everyone has different movies, different films that have kind of pushed them in the direction of their careers or different moments in their life, and kind of like that comfort film, or for some filmmakers, that inspirational film that inspired them to be a filmmaker. And I have several of those. Before I get into the whole Wizard of Oz Wicked aspect, I'll break down a few other movies that have been really inspirational for me. So the first one was Wizard of Oz, which I'll talk about in a second. And then the second one was Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Narnia has always been one of my favorite books, but the movie was the first time that I realized there's more to movies than just what you see on the screen. There's a whole behind the scenes aspect, and I loved that. If you have questions about the waterfall scene in Chronicles of Narnia, I could explain that to you. But it opened my eyes to a whole other world of filmmaking that I didn't know. And so that film will always be very close to my heart. And then the next one is definitely Little Women, because I love Little Women. And it's my favorite book, it's my comfort book, but Greta Gerwig's version of Little Women, it brings out different aspects of the characters that you've never really focused on or understood before. And I have talked about that in a previous episode. I'm blank. I think it's in the Rise to Bloom episode. I'll link that below. But there's a little part where I talk about it. And then next is 5 Feet Apart by Justin Baldoni. And for those who don't know, well, even though I've already mentioned it in the intro, I live with cystic fibrosis. And cystic fibrosis and just different genetic diseases are not always represented well in the media. And for me, 5 Feet Apart was the film that it had some of that representation for me. And it was important for me to see that on the big screen. I mean, it's mentioned all the time in like medical shows, but it's never always accurately portrayed. And with 5 Feet Apart, I think the director and Justin Baldoni and the crew and the cast did a phenomenal job. And to me, I feel like brought more awareness and advocacy to the community. I feel like because of that movie, people now understand what I talk about when I mention 5 Feet Apart. And that's really, really special. And that film will always be very near and dear to my heart. But Wicked is a film that is a film, Wicked and Wizard of Oz, it has a whole other meaning and aspect to me. Wizard of Oz was the very first book I had ever read. Like, not ever read, but the first really big chapter book I read all by myself. And would read it over and over and over again because it really captured this idea of going somewhere over the rainbow and going to another world. And the movie just drew me in, and just going from plain old sepia land of Kansas and then transporting to Technicolor Oz, land of Oz. And for me, that was just such a magical place. But then as I grew older, I became familiar with the musical Wicked, and it was a show that resonated so much with me because, hey, it's kind of like the backstory of Wizard of Oz, for those who don't know, but I really related to the characters of Elphaba. And just the fact where it kind of has that resemblance of, with that quote that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. For me, Elphaba, she's kind of like the outcast that no one really wants to be with, or that one that not many people understand or take the time to understand. And, you know, living with cystic fibrosis, people put a lot of limits on you. And I'm the type of person who likes to test those limits and go beyond that and defy gravity, I guess you could say. And Elphaba was just, I saw a lot of me in her. And having a disease, you feel different sometimes. Like, I don't try to, like, let it get to me. I haven't let it try to do that for me. Let me repeat that, because that was not English. I haven't allowed that where I feel different from others. It's just the cards I've been dealt. Something extra I have to do. But I know that having cystic fibrosis is a gift, and has allowed me to have this opportunity to speak to so many, share my story and share other people's stories, and bring awareness and be an advocate. But it doesn't mean like I don't have my challenges, like I do. And sometimes like I realize that there's so much I can do, and sometimes I do have my limits, even though I want to say like everything is unlimited and I can defy gravity and do all these things. You know, I have to remember sometimes cystic fibrosis will remind me like, hey, you're not Superwoman. But Elphaba was just a character I could always relate to in the musical world. And then seeing it in film was just, it brought tears to my eyes, because it's just, like I said, it's a character that I love so much. But seeing the portrayal in film is just like a whole other aspect, and brought it to a whole new level. So last year when I was saying I was so excited for Wicked, like, even though my friends were like, okay, you need to calm down, people who actually took the time to listen understood, like, it's not just a character, it's not just a musical, it's a character that I feel representation with, it's a character that I relate to, it's a musical with songs that resonate so much with me because I feel it, I understand it. And that's something that is so important for me as a filmmaker, that you are able to see yourself on screen. Everyone should have a character or see a story where you're like, oh my gosh, I relate to that. Or, that character looks just like me. Representation, diversity is so important. I feel like in Wicked, John Chu, he did an incredible job with it, with a diverse cast, but also the fact of having a diverse cast with, like, who played Nessarose, who's in the wheelchair, actually hiring an actress who is actually in a wheelchair, not someone who can actually walk and then is just acting like they can't in a wheelchair. You know, yes, anyone can do that, but it's important to have those people who have that relatability, have that story, walk in those shoes of understanding of what life is like in a wheelchair, how it feels. Those are the people who should be on screen representing those characters, and even more. And so, like, the same thing goes for 5 Feet Apart. Like, I will always say that is one of the top films for me, because representation is important for me, and I know it's important for other people, and I want to be able to provide that for audiences. That's why I want to provide with my podcast, where guests can be on here who can share their stories, and there'll be an audience member who can relate to that. With films and books that my company produces, that it's relatability, but also being inspired and having hope is what I want to continue to really put out there in the community. And again, like the reason why I focus on this quote, from 5 Feet Apart, if you sum it up, it's human touch, our first form of communication. It connects us when we're happy, bolsters us in times of fear, excites us in times of passion and love. We need that touch from the ones we love, almost as much as we need air to breathe. With cystic fibrosis, the reason why the movie is called 5 Feet Apart, with cystic fibrosis, you have to be 6 feet apart, because we're a risk to each other. Not like normal person and CF. It's CF person with a CF person. We both have different bacterias, or could be carrying something that could be deadly to the other person. It's that serious. And I've had friends pass away from this disease, and some of them, our friendships have been online. And if I've known them in person, some of them I've never hugged, never touched their hand, never. And I feel like a lot of us learned about how that feels during the pandemic, and that's when I created this podcast in the pandemic, just for a way for connection for everyone. And I think that's one thing I've really learned also from Wicked, and have learned from the characters of Wicked as well, is that you're going to be different from others, and that's okay. But sometimes society, sometimes people won't see that that's okay. But having that connection, having that human touch, having that community is important. And I feel like that's something I've learned from Wicked. And, you need those friendships, whether they're for a short time or for a long time, that have that connection. People go and people come and go, but they've come into your life for a reason. And they change you for good, honestly. They make an imprint on your life, and it's how you grow from that. And despite what society will say sometimes, and despite how things are looking in your life right now, whether you're going through a season where you're just by yourself, or you're going through a season where there's different changes, it's okay. I feel like right now there's a lot happening in this world, and that, positivity and happiness, it's kind of hard right now for some people. But the reason why I'm sharing all of this is because I don't know. I feel like this episode has been all over the place, but that's literally how my brain has been feeling for the past few weeks. But I do want to say, there are going to be big changes and little changes in your life. And like I said, you grow from it. And it's how you learn and adapt and grow as a person through it all. And it's not always going to be easy. And you're going to want to have that community. Have that community that surrounds you to be better. Surrounds you to make you stronger. I've learned from living with cystic fibrosis, it can be very lonely having this disease, because there's very few people that I can actually talk to who understand about it. But there are people out there who know what it's like. So you're not alone in circumstances that you're going through. You matter. Your voice matters. And don't let anyone tell you that your opinion, your voice, your presence doesn't matter, because it does. There's lots of different people on this earth, but there's only one you. And even if this episode only reaches one person, it's impacted one person. Your life, your words, your choices, your actions, it can affect one person, which can cause a domino effect, good or bad. And I choose to be on the good side of it, despite how things can be in life and frustrating and sad. it's important to reach out and have that connection, have that community, and ask for help. Something I've been learning a lot about is it's okay to ask for help. I'm very stubborn. I don't like to ask for help. I feel sometimes it's weakness and it's embarrassing. But the thing is, it's not embarrassing and it's not a weakness. In fact, it takes courage to ask for help. It takes courage to speak up for yourself. And I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but you can do it. You can do it. You can speak up for yourself. No one knows how you're feeling but you. You can speak up and ask for help because there are people who will want to be there for you. Friend, family, a teacher. There's people out there to support you for a reason. You know, I'm obsessed with the drawings and the artwork of hands reaching and almost touching or barely touching. And it's the reaching out for help, reaching for that human touch, reaching for connection and community. And it's an inspiring picture for me to always look at, because for me it's a reminder of keep going, but don't feel afraid to reach out for help. Don't feel afraid to ask for help. Don't feel afraid to help someone. And also, at the same time with having cystic fibrosis, when someone passes away or when someone is struggling, for me, that image of hands reaching for each other or that quote of human touch, it's just a reminder of we all have our different battles, and there are different legacies to continue on and different points of life, different things to bring awareness for and advocate for. And it's the sign of coming together. So for those who always wonder, like, why my first film, like, the logo is reaching for hands. And I just think it's such a powerful image for me. It's just the fact of, like, we need to be there for each other. And I feel like nowadays we need to be there for each other now more than ever. And I hope that, if you need someone to talk to and need something to watch, something to listen, someone to reach out to and talk to, I hope that my platforms can be that safe space for you, because I want my platforms to be a safe space for everyone. And I hope that my videos and I hope that my podcasts can bring encouragement to you. I know I've been posting and ghosting a lot, and that it's just simply just because I've had a lot going on in my life where it's just a lot to balance. But I am trying that for 2025. I'm really trying to be consistent again, but also on top of that, I know that there are people out there who are waiting for podcast episodes. I know there are people out there waiting for new YouTube videos, but not only just that, I know that I have my different comfort creators and podcasters, and I know that there's a couple people out there who have said I'm that for them, and I'm honored, and I hope that I can continue to share my faith and share hope and positivity to you now more than ever. So if you do want to follow my personal channel where I put up vlogs and just comfort stuff and lifestyle and health and productivity and books and filmmaking related videos, I do have a YouTube channel called Ashley's Roses. On Instagram, I'm at ashleys.roses. But then for the podcast, on YouTube, it's on my company channel called Roseraie Media. And I also have my company Instagram, Roseraie Media. And then the podcast episodes are shown there. But the podcast also has its own Instagram at Blooming Roses Podcast. And then The episodes can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. And you can follow any of those. I always repost about a podcast episode on any 3 of those channels. And I hope you guys will stick around. And I'm excited for what's to come this year. But just know that I'm going to end this with a quote from Sierra Boggess. You're enough. You're so enough. It's unbelievable how enough you are. Remember to be the rose that blooms in adversity, and I'll talk to you guys in the next episode.